You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. Life is but a moment between the past and the future, and this is clearly understood after someone close to you passes away. There were 56 chairs set up for the funeral. 56. I counted them while everyone else was crying. Carol had chosen the folding chairs with silver trim because they looked better in photos, but only 55 ended up being used. The one next to her, the one meant for me, stayed empty. She told the usher not to let me sit there. She said it would make things messy. Messy. As if grieving your dad while secretly texting your lawyer about a divorce isn't already messy. I stayed in the back, not beside her, not with the family, not even with the distant cousins. I stood next to a ficus plant and a woman who once dated her uncle back in the 90s. I held a funeral program with my last name spelled wrong. No one handed me a tissue. And when she got up to speak about her father, Clark Livingston, the oil tycoon, the man who once told me I smelled like drywall, she didn't bring me up. Not once. Not in the list of people left behind. Not in the thank you list. Not even a glance in my direction. She wore black silk and heels sharp enough to bruise someone's pride. She cried in a way that looked just right. Enough to seem sincere, not enough to mess up her makeup. And when she sat back down, she leaned in close and whispered something to the man sitting in my seat. He laughed. I guess she was cheating on me. More and more often this person was around her. They were very close, and more often than not just as friends. But I decided to take a pause, not to drop everything at once and leave. I thought she would come to her senses and we would move on together. I had no idea who he was. Didn't care, because what happened after the service, that's where the real story begins. It wasn't the money, not yet. It was what Carol did on her way out. She let her handkerchief fall. On purpose, right in front of me. I bent to pick it up like a fool, and that's when I noticed it. A folded corner of some document in her clutch. I saw my name, in bold letters, right next to a case number. And that's when it hit me. Hard. She had filed for divorce before the funeral, before the flowers were delivered, before the speech. Before she cried over a man who disliked me and pretended to still care about me. And just 2 days later, she'd collect $250 million. And 2 days after that, she would walk into our home, hand me a plain white envelope and say, "Owen, I'm choosing myself." But the will? The will had different ideas. Ideas Carol didn't see coming. Ideas that made her go pale in a room full of dark wood furniture and legal tension. Ideas that, for the first time in a long while, made me angry. I didn't sleep the night before the will reading. Not for a second. I lay on a pull-out couch in my cousin's basement, listening to pipes clank and buzz, wondering if I should even bother going. What was the point? Carol had already taken it all. Not just the marriage, but the pride I used to have standing next to her. When a woman leaves you before the flowers on her father's grave even wilt, you stop expecting the world to be fair. But that document, that quick flash of bold print with my name on it, it stuck with me like a hangnail you can't stop picking at. Why would Clark Livingston, a man who used to call me the lawn ornament, include me in anything? His estate sat on a private hill in Hampton Chase, behind tall iron gates and quiet gossip. The kind of place where even the air smells rich. I wasn't allowed in the front like the others. I was told to use the side door, the one normally used by caterers and staff, which probably made Clark smile wherever he was. A small group was gathered in the study, leather chairs, animal heads on the walls, and an old grandfather clock that probably survived 3 world wars. Carol was already there, legs crossed, wearing a slate gray outfit, no more black. Her mourning period was over. She looked at me without hate, without even sympathy. Just a blank business-like look, like I was someone she once shared a lease with. Sitting beside her was the same man from the funeral. The first thing I noticed was his shoes, shiny loafers with little gold labels. Nobody wears shoes like that unless they want people to notice. I took a seat way in the corner where the sunlight from the window couldn't quite reach. Nobody said hello, not even the lawyer who walked in holding a thick manila envelope like it held state secrets. He cleared his throat and began. As the legal representative for the late Mr. Clark Livingston, I'll now read his final instructions, which were witnessed, notarized, and signed 2 months before he passed. 2 months? That hit me like a punch. Clark had changed his will not long ago, very recently, after the last family vacation, but before the heart attack. I remembered Carol going on that trip by herself. "You'd be bored anyway," she said, tossing sunscreen into her suitcase. Back then, I believed her. Now, I wasn't so sure. The lawyer started going over the assets, properties in Rhode Island, a flat in Paris, 3 cars that cost more than the house I grew up in, paintings by artists I couldn't even pronounce. Each item felt like it belonged in someone else's dream life. Then came the part about who gets what. To my daughter, Carol Elise Livingston. She tilted her head slightly like she was getting ready to be crowned. I leave her the amount of $1 million to be managed by the family trust under the guidance of Mr. Bradley Roberts. Carol blinked, just once. The lawyer didn't react. She cleared her throat and asked, "Did you mean 100 million?" The whole room froze. It was the kind of silence that fills up the space like fog. The lawyer fixed his glasses. "No, 1 million, the rest to Mr. Livingston's estate will go to a different person, as explained in this letter." Then he opened a sealed envelope, handwritten. He unfolded a single piece of paper and started to read. It was Clark's voice on the page. "If you're hearing this, Carol, then I'm already gone. I saw you change. Not over years, but in just a few weeks. You stopped coming by unless cameras were rolling. You brought that man, the one you thought I didn't notice, into my home and laughed behind my back. I'm not an idiot. You cared more about your inheritance than your father. So, my money won't be your reward." Carol's lips parted slightly. No sound came out, not even a sigh. The lawyer kept going, voice steady. "To the man who married my daughter knowing she'd one day turn against him. To the man who handled my disrespect with grace and stayed even when walking away would have been easier. Owen Thomas Brooks, I leave the rest of my estate to him." In that moment, it felt like time stopped. I forgot how to breathe. Carol stared at me like I had antlers growing out of my head. The man beside her stood up, like his chair had turned dangerous. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't asked for this. All I wanted was my marriage. I wanted our cat. I wanted our quiet Sunday mornings again. But none of that mattered anymore. I was now the legal heir to a $250 million fortune, and the woman who walked away from me was now staring at the floor like it had betrayed her too. I walked out before they even finished the paperwork. I needed fresh air. I needed space. I needed to laugh, cry, and maybe throw up all at once. She ran after me. I heard her heels clicking fast across the marble, faster than I'd seen her move in years. "Owen!" she called, but I didn't stop. I kept going, down the driveway, past the fountain, through the gates, because for the first time ever, I wasn't the one being left behind. I walked for over an hour that day, not because I didn't have a ride, not because I was trying to be dramatic. I just felt like I might burst if I stood still. The air felt thick. Even the trees lining the road seemed to lean in, whispering behind my back. I didn't want the money. I wanted to go back in time. I wanted to rewind 6 months and shake myself until I saw all the signs I missed. I wanted to return to before Carol started hiding behind her phone, before she started wearing new perfume and saying, "You wouldn't understand the world I come from." When I got back to my cousin's house, I sat down on the pull-out couch, still in the wrinkled shirt I wore to the reading, staring at a fake plant in the corner. My cousin's kid was watching a cartoon with flying animals. I could barely hear it. All I could hear was Clark's words repeating in my head. "To the man who stayed even when he should have left." I didn't even know he had seen me that way, the real me. And now he was gone. I didn't sleep that night either, but this time it wasn't because I was confused. It was fear. I wasn't made for this life. I didn't know what to do with that kind of money. I had always lived on coupons, cheap noodles, and carefully planned gas money. I didn't even know how to talk to a lawyer. What do you do with a fortune when, just last week, you couldn't afford the fancy peanut butter? But Carol, she knew. She knew exactly what to do. The next morning, she was waiting for me in front of the depot where I worked. Yeah, I still showed up. What else was I supposed to do? She was leaning against her BMW like she hadn't broken my heart and walked away. Like nothing had ever happened, and her eyes didn't look sad. They didn't even look sorry. They looked hungry, sharp, controlled hunger. "We need to talk," she said, pushing her sunglasses up into her hair like she was in a legal drama. "No, we really don't," I said, brushing past her. But she followed me, right into the building, right past my boss. She cornered me near the break room, standing so close I could still smell that vanilla lotion she used when we still shared a bed. For a second, I almost forgot everything. I almost remembered what it felt like to wake up beside her and think I'd lucked out. Then she said it. "You don't deserve this, Owen." No sorry, no regret, just that. I stared at her, shocked she could even say that out loud. She blinked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "You think this is your money?" she said, lowering her voice. "This wasn't supposed to happen. He was just trying to hurt me. That's all this is. He was always good at twisting things. You're just a symbol, Owen. This isn't really about you." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know how else to keep my hands from shaking. "A symbol?" I asked. "So I was never even real to you?" She crossed her arms. "You were a mistake that lasted too long." That sentence. I still feel it in my bones. A mistake that lasted too long. Before I could say anything, before I could even think, she reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. It was packed with legal documents, highlighted lines, and sticky notes poking out like sharp yellow teeth. "This is a revised proposal," she said, "for dividing the estate. You don't need all of it. You don't know how to handle it? You'll waste it. Let's be honest, you'll get crushed." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It's an offer, Owen. A chance to walk away with your pride before you make us both look bad." She smiled then. That same smile she used to give sales clerks when she wanted them to break the rules. I didn't take the folder. I couldn't. My hands were tight fists at my sides. Not from rage. I wasn't raised to hit or yell. But from shame. Because part of me believed her. Part of me thought, maybe she's right. Maybe I don't belong in that world. But another part, a quieter voice deep inside, said maybe I do. Maybe Clark saw something in me that Carol never did. Maybe staying, even when it hurt, meant more than just weakness. She turned and walked off, heels tapping the floor, folder still in her hand. "You'll call me," she said without turning around. "You always do." But this time, I didn't. Because this time, I had something new. Power. And Carol, she wasn't finished playing her games, but neither was I. By the end of that week, nothing in my life felt real. I was still clocking in at the depot, still eating cheap cereal in someone else's basement, and still getting texts from Carol pretending she was doing me a favor. She didn't beg. Carol never begged. She made deals. Cold, careful words. "Let's be smart about this. We don't need to drag it out." Think about the media. The media, as if anyone cared about a guy who once fixed his neighbor's dryer in exchange for leftover ribs. But someone must have been paying attention, because by Friday, I got a call from one of Clark's estate lawyers. Not the one from the will reading, a younger voice this time, a little nervous. He asked if I could come in to go over some extra documents. I told him I didn't get it. He said, "It has to do with how the inheritance is set up. You'll want to see it yourself." The office was in one of those glass buildings downtown, the kind I used to walk past on my way to grab dollar menu lunches, thinking I didn't belong there. The receptionist didn't even look up. I waited on a leather couch that cost more than my first car, sweating through my shirt and trying not to touch anything. When they brought me into the conference room, they handed me a sealed folder and stepped out to give me privacy. I opened it slowly. My name was printed in bold on the first page. I scanned the lines, not understanding most of the legal words, until I hit a section called Addendum, Conditions of Inheritance. Turns out, Clark wasn't just bitter. He was clever in a sharp, almost dramatic way. The money wasn't just handed to me, it came with strings. A big part of the estate, nearly 40%, was placed into a trust in my name. But here's the catch. That money wouldn't come to me unless I stayed divorced from Carol for at least 18 straight months. If I ever got back together with her, married or not, I'd lose that entire portion. It would go instead to, of all things, a sanctuary for abandoned dogs. I read that part 3 times, each time more shocked. Clark had written a rule that would punish me if I ever went back to her. It wasn't just about the money, it was a challenge, a test from beyond the grave. And he'd left a note, in his handwriting, scanned and attached at the end. "Owen, if you're tempted to return to the cage, remember, you were never the pet. She only knew how to feed you. Don't let her leash you again." GD. It was cruel and strangely poetic. The same man who once made fun of me for folding Carol's laundry was now, after death, telling me I deserved freedom and a future. All I had to do was stay away from her. I should have been thankful. I should have felt relief. But instead, I felt sick, because Carol had already come back. She was trying to pull me in again. And now, it wasn't just about love or heartbreak. It was about control, tactics, manipulation. She hadn't changed. She was just trapped. That night, I didn't answer her call. She left a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. The next morning, I saw her parked outside my cousin's house. Again, same car, same coat. But this time, no legal folder. Just her, red eyes, hair a mess, looking almost real. "I just want to talk," she said. "You always do." She looked down at her hands, then back up. "You've read the documents, haven't you?" I didn't say anything. Her jaw tensed. "It's humiliating, Owen. What he did to me, to us. That clause is a joke. It's disgusting. He's laughing at us from the grave." "Are you sure he's not just laughing at you?" I said. I didn't mean for it to sound that cold. She blinked. That was the first crack. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. But I let out a short, tired laugh. "Didn't mean to? Carol, you filed for divorce before his ashes even cooled. I was just supposed to lie down while you took the money and the guy in the fancy shoes." She looked like she might cry, but no tears came, and that's when I realized something that she couldn't. Not because she was too proud, but because she didn't actually feel it, and maybe she never had. Before she left, she tried one more thing. She pulled a photo from her coat pocket. It was old, from when we were happy. A picnic by the lake. Plastic wine glasses. She was lying on my chest. She held it up between her fingers like it meant something. "I keep this with me," she said. "You weren't just a step on the way to something better, Owen." But I didn't take the photo. I left it on the porch after she drove off. That night, I looked up the dog sanctuary named in the clause. They had over 300 rescued dogs. One was called Captain Pickles. If I took Carol back, Captain Pickles got my money. I didn't want my self-worth measured by a pug with a lazy eye, but in that moment, I got it. Carol wasn't trying to win me over. She was trying to stop a bomb her father left ticking, but it was already counting down, and I wasn't going to lose this time. The photo stayed on the porch for 2 days. It rained that first night, just a light drizzle, enough to smudge the ink and blur my face. I thought maybe my cousin's kid had brought it in, but when I stepped outside for work on Monday, it was still there, stuck to the wood, its edges curling like it had aged 2 decades overnight. I picked it up, not because I missed her, but because I needed the reminder, not of what we had, but of what she walked away from. You'd think this would be the end, right? That Carol would cut her losses, vanish into some mansion, and leave me to enjoy my surprise fortune. But no. Carol never knew how to lose quietly, especially not to someone like me. 3 days later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No stamp. Just dropped in. My name printed in red ink. Big, dramatic, like someone trying too hard to be mysterious. Inside, one piece of paper, no header, no note, just 2 lines. "There are things you don't know, Owen. You should be careful who you trust with Clark's secrets. No name." At first, I thought it was a joke. Then I thought maybe it was Carol messing with me again, trying to shake me up and make me drop the inheritance. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized. It didn't sound like her. Carol didn't warn. She gave orders. That night, I stayed up going through all the folders, emails, and documents the lawyer had given me. I hadn't looked at most of them before. Honestly, it had all been too much. But now, I was looking for something, anything that could explain the message, and I found it. Not on letterhead, not in legal talk. It was tucked in the back of an envelope marked Miscellaneous Correspondence. Inside were a few printed emails from Clark's private server. Most were boring. Notes to his assistant, reminders for the staff. But one thread stood out. The subject line said, Carol's request. Urgency noted. I opened it. It was from someone named A. Harrison. The message was short and formal. "We've reviewed the request. Document destruction would require written sign-off from all trustees, per the original agreement. So far, only one signature has been submitted. We will not move forward without the second." At first, I didn't get it. Document destruction? Trustees? But the date was only 2 weeks before Clark died. I went back to the earlier email in the chain, and that's when I froze. Carol had asked for the removal, no, the destruction, of a file called Addendum C, Disqualification Clause. I didn't need a law degree to know what that meant. I printed the emails and called Clark's lawyer first thing the next morning. When I told him what I'd found, he paused. just long enough to let me know he hadn't expected this. "Mr. Brooks," he said carefully, "those documents were reviewed after Mr. Livingston passed. The clause is valid. As you know, no changes were made after the final notarized version." "So she tried to remove the clause?" I said, more to myself than to him. "She reached out, yes, but nothing was changed legally." I hung up and sat there in silence. Carol hadn't just left me. She knew about the clause. She knew what her father had done and tried to get rid of it before he died. That photo she left, the visit to my job, the gentle voice, the memories, the tears. It wasn't just manipulation. It was damage control. That night, I got another voicemail from her. She didn't know I'd found the emails yet, but her tone had shifted, still calm, but thinner, weaker. She was slipping, and she knew it. "Owen, please. I know this got ugly, but you and I both know he only did this to hurt me. You're just a stand-in. I was the one who lived under his rules. I deserve something from this. You're not really going to punish me, are you?" I listened to it twice. Then I saved it. Not because I needed evidence, but because I wanted to remember who she really was when no one was watching. But what Carol didn't know, and what Clark had probably hoped I'd discover, was that there were more than just emails. There were videos, security recordings, archive locks, dates, times. One file in particular, marked just 3 days before he died, was named Library, July 10th. I didn't even know the estate had a library, but apparently that's where the final twist was hidden. And Carol? She had no clue I was about to find it. If you've ever stood in a room that was never meant to feel warm, you'd understand what it was like stepping into Clark Livingston's private library. It took almost a week of phone calls, signatures, and waiting for permission from the estate manager before they let me back on the property. I half expected someone to stop me at the gate, say it was a mistake, that the inheritance wasn't really mine, that I'd go back to being nobody. But the guards recognized me now, not as Carol's ex, not as the guy who fixed heaters. No, now I was Mr. Brooks, the sole heir to the Livingston fortune. And even the marble lions by the front door seemed to stand taller as I walked in. The library was upstairs, in the west wing, a part of the house Carol never let me near. She used to say it was off limits, full of old family stuff I wouldn't understand. But now I understood perfectly. It wasn't about books, it was about power. Because hidden between leather-bound books and a globe that hadn't moved in decades was a drawer behind a false panel. I didn't find it myself. One of the staff, a quiet man named Horace, showed me. He didn't say much, just handed me a brass key and said, "He wanted you to see this." Inside the drawer was a small flash drive, resting in a velvet-lined box. Labeled in Clark's handwriting, Library, July 10th, Final Record. It felt heavier than it should have, like it was filled with every truth I had been too blind to see. I watched it alone, in the estate study, with the doors locked and the curtains closed. The video was less than 5 minutes long. No background music, no edits. It was just plain footage from a fixed security camera above the fireplace in the library. It showed Carol. She wasn't crying. She wasn't grieving. She wasn't even alone. She was pacing the room, clearly upset, gripping her phone in one hand and waving the other around. She wasn't speaking to Clark. He was sitting behind his desk, perfectly still, just watching her. His face didn't look sad. It looked tired. I leaned in closer. "You have no right to do this," Carol snapped. "You really want to die smiling, knowing you've taken everything from me?" Clark didn't say a word. "You hate me so much you'd rather hand over your empire to a guy who once unclogged your toilet?" Still no reaction. She stepped closer, her voice louder. "He's weak, Dad. He doesn't fit in our world. He's not even like us. He can barely dress himself. This is embarrassing." Clark finally moved just slightly. He leaned forward. "You made your choice," he said, voice cold. "You left him before I was even gone." "So what?" she said bitterly. "You were halfway to the grave anyway." He raised a hand, cutting her off. "And yet, I lived long enough to rewrite the will." She stopped, her face, usually so calm, twisted into something close to panic. He kept going, speaking slower now. "You thought you were clever, that you could have your freedom, keep the money, skip the consequences. But Carol, there are consequences. You always thought love was a bargaining chip. But Owen? He never asked me for anything. Never took a cent. Never insulted me, even when I tried to push him away. Carol stepped back. Her face was harder to read now, anger mixed with confusion. "This isn't about love," she finally said. "This is just punishment." "No," Clark replied. "It's protection. I'm protecting what I've built, from you." That was the end of the video. I sat there for a long time. The screen went dark. I could see my own reflection in the glare. It didn't feel like a win. It wasn't some movie ending where the bad guy is exposed and justice comes down like lightning, number. It hurt. All of it hurt. Because deep inside, I still hoped she had loved me, even a little. But hearing how she talked about me, like I was some mistake, she hadn't lost me. She had thrown me away. And now, the only thing she wanted was what I had ended up with by accident. What her father left me, not to hurt her, but because he saw something in me. But here's what Carol didn't expect, what I finally understood in that cold, quiet room. She didn't just lose the money. She lost the only person who might have stood up for her. Because hidden deep in the file folders, behind all the paperwork, the emails, the property lists, was something else. A medical report. A sealed envelope marked private, read after death. Inside was one last instruction from Clark. One that didn't just cut Carol out of the will. It suggested she might have done more than lie and scheme. It hinted she might have helped move things along. I don't know how long I sat there holding that envelope. I didn't open it right away. My hands were shaking, like the paper might bite if I peeled it open. I've never liked mysteries. I'm the kind of person who Googles movie endings just to stop worrying. But this wasn't a plot twist I was waiting for. This was real. And Clark's initials were stamped on the seal. The note inside wasn't long or dramatic like the video. Just one page, handwritten in neat en bloc letters. Clark's handwriting looked sharp and careful, like he measured every word before writing it down. If you're reading this, Owen, I'm dead, and you've chosen not to give in to Carol. Good. You've always been stronger than she ever thought. This isn't a confession. I'm writing because I don't believe I'll die of natural causes. I know my daughter. I know what she's capable of when she's desperate. That line, that one sentence. It hit like ice in my veins. I have no proof. Just my instincts. I was healthy before the retreat. My doctors confirmed it. But after she visited that weekend, things changed. Chest pain, dizzy spells. She gave me some new tea, said it was part of a cleanse. I threw up after the first night and never drank it again. Still, I said nothing. What kind of father thinks his daughter might be trying to speed up his death? But, Owen, if you're reading this, and I didn't go peacefully, promise me one thing. Don't let her walk away untouched. I placed the paper on the desk and stared at the wood grain. This wasn't a confession, not in a legal sense. It wasn't official. Just a warning. A message from a man who'd spent a lifetime figuring people out. I wanted to tell myself he was just being paranoid. That grief had clouded his judgment, even if he was sharp. But in my gut, I knew the truth. I remembered Carol in the video. The way she hissed about taking everything. Her obsession with the will. The fear in her eyes every time she came back pretending to care. It all started adding up. Then I remembered something else. Those security logs. Horace had shown them to me for a second during the tour. They kept track of who entered which rooms and when. I hurried downstairs and asked if I could see them again. Horace hesitated, but when I showed him the letter, his face went hard, and he nodded. We opened the records from the weekend Clark mentioned. Carol had entered the kitchen 6 times, the guest room twice, the library once, and Clark's private bedroom 7 times, all between midnight and 4 a.m. 7 times. When I asked how often guests were allowed in that room, Horace answered plainly, never, unless invited. And that was it. I knew Clark. He wouldn't invite her into his room in the middle of the night, not 7 separate times. But even with all that, it still wasn't enough. Not for the police, not for court. But it was enough for me. Enough to see the pattern. Everything she'd done since the funeral wasn't about grief or regret. It was fear. Not fear of losing money, but fear that I might find out what she really did. That she might have helped move the clock forward. That fear was wrapped in perfume, fake smiles, and soft voices. So, I made a choice. I called her. She picked up right away. Out of breath, like she'd been staring at the phone for hours. "Owen, I found the video," I said. "The one from the library. And the letter." She didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit. Then, quietly, she said, "You're not supposed to have that." "No," I said. "I'm not." Just like you weren't supposed to be in his room 7 times after midnight. She breathed out sharply. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, and so do you. Another pause. Then carefully, using that same cold tone she always used when cornered, she asked, "What do you want?" It was the first time she didn't pretend to be innocent. And that's when I finally understood. Carol didn't believe in guilt, or shame, or family. She believed in leverage, so I gave her nothing. Nothing, I said. I want nothing from you. And I'm not giving you anything either. No money, no silence, no protection. You'll see. I didn't hear from her after that call. Not for a week, not for a month. Until, one rainy afternoon in early spring, I got a package. No return address, just my name, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a USB drive. No note, no explanation. Just a label written in black marker. You were right. I hesitated. For a long time. But curiosity won. I plugged it in, expecting maybe another recording, maybe more threats, maybe something meant to scare me. What I got was a video. Just under 1 minute, a hallway camera, Clark's estate again. Dated 2 days before his heart attack. It showed Carol, in the middle of the night, walking down the hall in a silk robe. She wasn't alone. Following her, just a few steps behind, was the man with the polished loafers, the one from the funeral, the one I'd never bothered to ask about. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their silence said everything. She opened the door to Clark's quarters. He went in first. She followed, closing it softly behind her. That was it. That was all I needed, because what everyone had assumed was Carol's solo act wasn't. There was someone else in it. Another player, another liar. I handed the footage to the lawyers the next day, and while they worked through the legal knots, I started digging. His name was Daniel Langford, a corporate advisor with a reputation for fixing inheritance disputes. Quietly. Permanently. He wasn't just Carol's rebound. He was her plan B. Maybe even plan A. But here's where it gets strange. 3 days after I submitted the footage, Daniel disappeared. No note, no warning. His firm said he was on sabbatical. His condo was empty. His car left at an airport he never boarded a flight from. And Carol. Carol went silent. No more voicemails, no more envelopes, not even a lawyer's letter. Gone, vanished, her accounts frozen. Her name scrubbed from board memberships. And me? I was finally left alone. But one night, sitting in the study where it all started, I found a second envelope tucked inside one of the books in Clark's library. This one had no seal, just my name. Inside, a key and a note. Check the lighthouse. I didn't even know there was a lighthouse. Not until Horace told me. Clark had owned a piece of land up the coast, a private retreat no one ever visited, except, apparently once, years ago. With Carol, when I got there, the door was unlocked. The lighthouse was empty, except for one thing, a locked safe, bolted to the floor. The key fit perfectly. Inside, a journal, leather-bound, handwritten, Clark's. It detailed everything. His suspicions, his regrets, his fears, and at the very end, something else. A second will, signed, notarized, hidden. And it didn't just change who got what. It revealed something no one knew. Carol wasn't his biological daughter. She had been adopted quietly, brought in by Clark's late wife before their marriage. It had been their secret, one Clark had agreed to keep, but he'd always known something was missing, a piece of her that never felt like his. And me? I wasn't just the outsider. I was the son of Clark's only brother, a man who died young, estranged from the family. Clark had tracked me down after Carol filed for divorce, had already planned to shift the estate. I wasn't a random act of revenge. I was his blood, and she wasn't. All those years I thought I didn't belong. I had more of a claim than she ever did. I closed the journal slowly, walked back out into the salt air, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt peace. Carol didn't just lose the fortune. She lost the story, and I got to rewrite the ending. What comes next is only the start. I finally know who I am, and I believe in what lies ahead.